everyone, I'm Mary Jo Bowling. I'm the Homes Editor for Luxe Interiors and Design in San Francisco. Today I'm going to be talking to Regan Baker of Regan Baker Design. Regan's known for work that's inviting and personal and modern, and today's project that we're going to look at certainly exemplifies that. It's in the Seacliff neighborhood of San Francisco, and Regan, I think that's one of the most intriguing neighborhoods in the city.
I agree. Seems like you're in suburbia, but you're
Yeah,
not.
yeah. I love Seacliff because it's nature and these classical homes, and that's the project that we're going to be talking about today. Now, I know your client. She said when she walked into this home, she knew it was the one. What about this house do you think made her feel that way?
Yeah, so I think, when she walked in, it was more of, she loves to renovate, and her husband does as well. But I think because they walked in and felt the floor plan was already kind of in a great spot, really just needed to open up a few walls. All the bedrooms were on the top floor, and you're able to basically be together. The laundry room was even on the on the top floor. So I think, and then also the guest room, which is, they call it the West Wing. They have a lot of politicians in their family, but they have guest rooms for their guests to stay in the West Wing. So it's definitely just that, and I think the natural light that just because it's on a rounded part of the lot, the house encompasses the entire length of that roundabout. So it's actually very well, I think, light wise, gives a lot of natural light, which is always great, I think, in anybody's lives to have the natural.
Okay, now Reagan, that was her impression, but what was your impression when you first walked through?
Yeah. So when I walked through, we worked with an architect, Robert Stiles, who actually had preemptively done a great part of the renovation. And we came in kind of with finishes and light fixtures. But when I walked in, there was just there's a lot of juxtapositioning angles when you first walked in. So kind of understanding where transitions were gonna meet. And then there were just some oddities, like, for example, her office, there was a jog on the wall, and I was like, but you also need, storage, practical needs. So we hid that. There were just some oddities that we hid based off of practical reasons. But overall, the house in general, I thought, because of the bones were so great, even we kept the molding and all of that, and then actually added molding in the living room just to kind of replicate it. But I do think overall it's a traditional home that I think spoke well to who they are and their styles, how they have merged together, just because the natural beauty of the house allowed for contemporary versus preppy.
So Reagan, when you looked at this list of things to do and what your client called a fixer, in your mind, what was the first thing that needed to be taken care of?
Yeah, so there were, our clients, just, I think overall the house had great bones. But when you first walk in, there's these, oddities. There's these 2 walls or 3 walls that actually kind of form a triangle. And so understanding kind of how we needed to case those out. I think that we had intended to keep them all, more modern and contemporary. And we decided to change those and actually case them in some areas just because we wanted that space to be defined better. Her office, for example, though, had a weird jog in it. And so we were we should cover these up with bookcases. And so a portion of her bookcases in her office is actually more shallow than the others because of that bump out. I think other than that, we worked with Rob Stiles, who is the architect, and he really did a lot of that reprogramming of the space. And so we, came on board with more of a finish, and then how to cover up those oddities. But yeah, that's for sure. I'd say the first thing is when you walk in, you kind of have literally a focal point to the kitchen, also to the living room and to her office. And so really making those 2 stand out, and the stairs, of course, how those blended together, but also created, this dichotomy of, marrying styles, was probably the biggest challenge, I'd say, but also what needed to be addressed the most.
Well, I mean, speaking of marrying styles, you mentioned that this was a couple where one had a very modern aesthetic and one had a more traditional aesthetic. Now I've heard designers joke about playing psychologist and you know,
Sure.
so how did you make that work, those two opposing aesthetics for this family?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, both of them probably couldn't be more opposite, but they did have one commonality, which was the color blue. I would say, so Evo's, aesthetic was very like the Just Steel movement. So they actually, it's a Netherlands, a Dutch movement, which basically right field, a lot of these architecture, it's more based on architecture and how everything's kind of reserved, more sculptural, less clutter. And whereas Missy, she was very preppy, very, traditional in her style and aesthetic. And so Evo actually inherited some nice antiques. And I think that was actually almost like a blessing, because it was kind of where we were allowed to bring the two together, but also with color blue.
Well, what role did blue play? Because you see it throughout the house.
Yeah, blue is a very important role. I mean, a lot of people ask us, is blue because it's, kind of gloomy in their area. And I don't definitely think that that's probably what was it, but, maybe psychologically there was a reason for that. But I do think because both of them actually agreed on the color, it was one of the probably the most powerful agreements of their aesthetic. And so it played a huge role just because we were able to use that throughout the house. And that was what kind of created that, synchronicity of, bringing all and melding their two crazy different styles together.
There's some spaces in the house where the blue is really pronounced. It's a very deep, dramatic color on multiple walls. And I know that, common knowledge says that that's very tricky to do. Is it tricky to do? How do you make that work?
Yeah, I mean, it is, I would say, we actually painted their living room a very bold, just the fireplace wall, a very bold blue. And I think the reason why we did that was, number one, because, again, marrying the two contemporary styles, Evo really wanted this shelf detail that really was just more simple rather than like having a built-in tradition. So in order to do that and to blend it into, kind of creating this accent, we actually painted that wall to make it feel like more built in. And so I think that's why it worked really well there. And then also, of course, adorned it and decorated it with a lot of tone on tone materials, so blacks and dark hues. And then her office, we did that just because we really wanted the two to speak to each other. But her office, because she loved the blue, we actually really kind of traditionalized it. So we wrapped and, encompassed it in its entirety, all the way around, even the ceiling, just because we wanted that, intimacy, but also is kind of a statement of who she was. And then the living room is kind of a statement of who he is. So
I got some emails after this article appeared. And even though it was in there, people were asking me, what's the name of that color? Can you tell everybody watching the name of the color?
It's a favorite Benjamin Moore color that we love to use. It's called Benjamin Moore Gentleman's Gray. It's actually more of a gray, but yeah, we love it.
It's one of those colors I always have to double check because it's gray, but it's blue too.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's probably why it works, bringing the blues together, but it's got a tad of gray to it. So yeah, not overly blue, and kind of understated as well, which is nice.
Let's talk about the weather here. I actually lived in Seacliff for 8 years, and I can attest that it does get very foggy out there. It's sometimes there can be gray skies for several days on end. So when you're thinking about a color palette for a house that's going to live in that neighborhood, what do you think about? Is there a way to mitigate that?
I mean, we did use a lot of blue. And I do think that probably does attest to, the moodiness of that, of Seacliff. But I do think white, we used a lot of white, and a lot of orange, which is, a complement, that actually in yellows to brighten up the space. So yeah, blue, I say for sure is, definitely sets the tone for that mood. But in order to play off of that, I would say calming, should we say, having the opposites of yellows and, gold tones and orange, it actually creates a happiness as well. So that's, yeah.
In the article, you referred to some of those colors as surprises in the room. So tell me about the importance of walking in a room and there's a splash of orange, a splash of yellow.
Yeah. So, the living room, the lady chairs, which are vintage, we actually, Evo is actually mother has a relationship with the Hermes, is a friend with the Hermes president, and that was actually one of the reasons why we chose an Hermes fabric. But one thing we did do that was really kind of spectacular is to create more orange. We actually flipped and reversed the fabric. Because we wanted that more of a pop. We actually felt it was more of the right color for the room. But yeah, I definitely think, when you walk in, it's kind of a surprise because you're like, whoa, that's, that's orange. But I think because it has a story too behind it, I think that's even more fun because you're able to talk about it. And I think that's one of the things we actually really enjoy doing is being able to create spaces that have that storytelling aspect. And why not have an Hermes fabric that's reversed on some lady chairs,
Did you have a lot of explaining to do to the upholsterer? Like saying, no, actually it's this side?
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. We actually had an upholsterer here in the city reupholster it. But yeah, we were like, yes, it's not, it's the opposite side. Don't do it wrong.
And, you were talking about orange being an interesting complement to blue. Those splashes of bright color really create a vibrancy in these rooms, don't you think?
Yeah, definitely. The family room, we actually did a really cool Casina chair as well in the family room, and the yellow of that chair again was bringing the idea of the pop and the ability to have this fun, playful personality. And they have this wonderful art collection that we actually worked with, and they added a few pieces with us. But the idea was really to work around their art collection and having those pops of color because they have colorful art, or specifically some of them aren't colorful, having more of a subdued element. That's actually another reason why we brought in those colors, is because we were trying to create this palette that connected to the art as well.
I wanted to ask you about the art collection, whether they brought it or whether they brought some of it and you rounded it out. How did that happen?
So yeah, the majority of the art is actually their collection. They worked, which I loved. So both of them, I think I mentioned earlier, have very matriarchy in their family. So their moms are just, Missy's mom was like a P&G, Procter & Gamble, like first woman executive there. And Evo's mom, was an ambassador in the Netherlands. And so having those moments, I really do think the art that they selected prior and had inherited, and then of course the ones that we acquired for them, always had like this female overarching theme, because they are such a female, the female presence in their entire being is just inbred with them. So I think it's actually a pretty fun story. A lot of like the Robin Dupuy art that's actually in the living room, that was a new piece that Evo had really, really loved. Netherlands artist, as well as the fireplace art. She's also a female. And then Daniel Morning, who they had acquired prior in the living rooms, as San Francisco-based artist, but all females and all have this awesome story to tell. I just think, as we were acquiring, or as we were going through their art, I was like, wow, this is really very cool. And then as we got to know them, they were like, yeah, moms are this and this. And we were like, wow, this is amazing. And so that really, I think helped them tell their story. I think they were like, is there too many females in our house? I was like, no, this is amazing. You guys have, this is your story. This is who you are. But yeah, I mean, they have, I don't, the actual all of the pieces, the pictures of their family heirloom photos in the living room as well. And that room is just like very art heavy, but you know, we took that entire old antiqued piece and we reclothed it with the velvet on the back, and then just literally did their entire, you know, ancestry all on this one wall, which I thought was really cool. But yeah, most of the art was theirs. We helped just, you know, guide them on it specifically, and like, you know, where to place them, just because color stories helped. And also the wow factors, right? So your moments of like, wow, and where not to put them and where to put them type of thing. Because you can do too much art.
Right. Oh, I love it. I love it. It's like the house of woman power. Very
yeah,
cool.
amazing.
And so, you know, you have this very strong statement-making art collection. Tell me about the furniture that this couple brought to the home and how you worked that into the design of the home and worked in new pieces with their heritage pieces.
So yeah, so we did. We actually had a lot of their antiques and heirlooms, and then we actually added a few antiques in addition. Like in the primary bedroom, we had some antique nightstands and an antique bookshelf. But the majority of the antiques are actually inherited from Evo, and a few pieces from Missy's family. But we definitely worked with, you know, again, the style movement. Evo had a ton of, you know, very primary geometric pieces that we worked around, and also put those like in an office or whatnot that wasn't going to be used or downstairs. But we worked with the majority. Yeah, a lot of the stuff was theirs, but we of course brought in some custom pieces, and a lot of the lady chairs are vintage. The sofa actually from Coup d'etat is vintage, that we had reupholstered, and then the some other new elements. But yeah, Casino is also, you know, the yellow chair, which I think I described earlier, and then we had a custom sofa in the living room. But yeah, the primary bedroom, we definitely did add some of those elements. But the credenza, I believe, actually was theirs. Yeah, we worked with a lot of theirs.
And so I wonder, you know, you mentioned that he is of Scandinavian descent,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm wondering if that's the way that expresses itself. How does that express itself in this house?
Yeah. So when we first met Evo and Missy, Evo was like, I don't like coffee tables. And I don't like any tables, anything that's, you know, around, you know, a sofa or whatever. He was very minimalist. And so I do think that definitely played an element of like simplicity. So, you know, as you would see, you know, if we were to do a very traditional home, you would probably be very decadent. You'd be wallpapering every wall, or, you know, not having just focal points painted in blue, you know. So we definitely, I think his style for sure, you know, we had to find ways to to marry their styles. And I do think that, you know, having the blue and having, you know, the furnishings of the way we did, and having more of a refined palette, I would say, was definitely a Scandinavian approach to the house, and definitely helped with marrying the two styles.
Now, the most memorable room, perhaps the most memorable room in this house, is the smallest. It's the elevator.
Oh my gosh.
I have never seen anything like it. Tell me about this elevator and how you got this amazing idea to use it differently.
So yeah, so they wanted a functioning elevator just because they throw a ton of parties, and they wanted the ability to have anybody in their homes to come up and down the stairs. And so you know, it needed to be functional, but it also needed to be a statement as well. And so the idea of basically having the bar be, you know, having it be open while they have parties was just like, you know, where else do we put a bar? Oh my gosh, the elevator. So it was, and then of course they loved it. It was also, you know, I think very probably much like it came together as a fruition and as an idea, like together, because they were like, this is amazing. So I think I literally was just, you know, having again the blue component of this, you know, a gate with brass accents, And then the ability for them to have the flexibility of this bar cart, you know, to serve people, but also have a stationary, you know, storage solution. But they also wanted to have, you know, luggage to be able to like throw it up there. So you know, it's definitely, yeah, a statement piece that they wanted to design around for the ability to have a party and have it be this like wow factor. They're just, yeah, they love to entertain. And I think that's probably one of that was the, you know, one of a fun thing to work with them was just, you know, having these ideas of out of the box thinking. And I think that was genius.
Oh, great. And do they actually like guests arrive and as they go up, they have a drink? Is that how it works?
No, actually, I wish that was how it works. So they basically have the door open, propped open. So it comes from downstairs to upstairs, which is the main level. But yeah, no, they actually, it's you can get to there downstairs from the one side of their house, but the main entrance, which is where people come in, they just have the door propped open and they serve from there.
Yeah. So it'd be like a little bar in a closet, except the doors are an elevator.
Exactly. Yeah. It's
and
great.
going upstairs is so much more fun.
It's just much more fun. Exactly.
Now, Regan, we were talking a few minutes ago about you have kids, I have a kid, and I think the clients have kids similar ages to ours.
Yes.
So, having that commonality, you know, being a mom with kids this age, how does that work? How did that work into this project?
Yeah, that's a great point. You know, I think it you know, in terms of like longevity and having kids, and we actually have a dog now. We definitely thought, you know, as myself, I always want to be cognizant of, you know, putting fabrics on things that are very durable, not having too many things around that are breakable. And so I do think that had, I think just in the way we positioned the rooms, but also styled, everything was kind of, you know, away from the moment. And so it allowed, I do think as a parent and as we're designing, we tend to think of things that are, you know, more attuned to like, yeah, safety, and also just, you know, bringing personality into, because I do think kids, they, you know, they definitely had some opinions as we were designing. They allowed them to have, you know, hey, what do you think about this? You know, so I do think, and that's always, I think, one of the things that we enjoy doing too, is to get a holistic approach for the family. But yeah, I think, you know, the colors, but also like flow and layout was for sure a thought when we were designing.
I don't know if I shared this with you, but I actually saw this house when it was on the market.
Oh my gosh.
It's around the corner from where I used to live, and I went to see it when it was for sale. And the little solarium struck me as a real design challenge. And then I saw this, I was like, wow, they did that so beautifully. So the solarium, tell us about what made it kind of a challenge and how you resolved that.
That's a great question. So the solarium, they always knew they wanted to keep it. I personally was like, I think you should keep this too, because I'm a very indoor outdoor nature person. And over there in Seacliff, as you know, it's very gloomy, and it's also can be very cold. And so we, you know, the idea of have the solarium to be able to utilize it and spend time there, to literally be in this outdoor area, but actually inside. And so, you know, it was an eyesore at first. We, you know, the floors were like concrete. There wasn't, you know, the transition, we had to bring up the floor so that the transitions from the main level and this level worked more seamlessly. And then it's also right off of the dining room table. So flow wise, it's, you know, it's a different, you have to embrace it type thing. But I think it turned out incredible, just because, you know, you have this entertaining moment, and they do have parties in the backyard, and it literally is kind of this moment where you can sit and still be outside, but be warm. But yeah, we had to change the flooring. We actually did a full custom, you know, wall-to-wall sofa. It was actually freestanding though, because of the structural glass components. But it's, yeah, it was definitely, it's a focal point too. So it's like, it needed to be a moment where, you know, as you're sitting at the dining table, it actually is very inviting to come in, and also a nice view into the space, but also feel like it's outdoors as well.
It's a perfect Seacliff thing, because it allows you to be outside on a foggy night. right?
Yeah, it's funny because we were they were debating on like, should we start over and just like gut this whole thing? And then we all came to this, no, it's kind of quirky and we actually like it, and it works, So yeah, that's one of my favorite spots.
One thing I noticed too when I look at this house is there's a series of statement light fixtures. And why was that important for these rooms to have these drama moments?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I would say when you walk in, the Billy Cotton fixture above, really needed to kind of speak to both of them. And Evo had a very strong opinion on like this being a moment, but also not too crazy. And so bringing in that contemporary modern style. And that's actually why we did it there. The next statement would be Missy's office. And that was definitely more, traditional moment for her, that was, allowed us to kind of, create her style. But I think just because that room is so small and she's sitting in, the desk is actually glass on the indoor plexiglass, just because the orientation of the way she wanted to sit in the room, and it actually is a much more inviting space. And the view of the Golden Gate Bridge is where she's sitting. But because that was kind of a floating, we really wanted to anchor that spot, her desk spot, and really kind of create this, more of like a vignette of this moment while you walk in. So you see, and a light fixture is very important for that. I think any lighting says statement or it's important to make a statement with lighting because it's part of the architecture and it also creates drama. And then in the living room, or let's say the dining room, we added a very spun pendant that actually, again, was more that contemporary style. And then they had this like very subdued, like webbed piece over the island. And, even though they're both pendants, the one over the island kind of goes away and just it is detract, but the focal point is the dining room. And it's a statement piece because it's like a very, I would say, more minimal, more modern. But then we also have the ledge that we created to create more style, which is Missy. So, yeah.
Well, Regan, thank you so much for talking to us today and for bringing this house to life for us again.
Yeah.
It's a real pleasure. And thank you everyone for watching DesignTV.
Hey everybody, this is Cindy Allen, Editor-in-Chief of Interior Design. Today we're talking about a very special and successful collaboration where design and sports meet head to head. And it's the perfect match where both come out winners. The project, the interiors of the crowning gem in the Mission Bay neighborhood of San Francisco. Yes, I'm talking about the Chase Center, made possible by the incredible design collaboration with Gensler, Williams-Sonoma, and the beloved Golden State Warriors. We're so excited. So first we have Rick Welts, the President and Chief Operating Officer of the Golden State Warriors. Rick, we are so excited to have you join us today. It's not the most usual thing, so this is very exciting.
Well, yeah, with this kind of design talent, I'm very nervous. So.
Don't be nervous. Don't be nervous. We'll help you through.
Okay.
Okay, then we've got Monica Bhargava. Monica is the Executive Vice President of Product Design and Development for Williams-Sonoma. Monica, I am super happy to see you.
I am delighted to be here, especially with the gang. I mean, I haven't seen everyone in so long, so it's so fabulous.
Well, I mean, any day with Monica is a wonderful day, but it's been, she's the magic princess who made this all work. And,
a magic princess. Wow, we're really starting on high, Monica. Okay, and then we have Jonathan Emmett, Principal and Design Director
Hi.
at Gensler Sports. Hi, Jonathan.
Hi, nice to see you today.
It's great to see you. And then we also have Edith Ponciano. She's the Associate and Senior Interior Designer for Gensler Sports. Hey, team. We do have a team, Rick.
We do. I put it up against anybody.
Yeah, I love that. Tell us what the catalyst was to building a new home for the Golden State Warriors.
The Warriors were playing in Oakland, an arena we loved, but also was the oldest arena in the NBA. People don't realize that, older than Madison Square Garden in New York City. And a wonderful place to watch a basketball game, but not a wonderful place to complete that experience for fans. And so Joe Lyko and Peter Guber bought the team almost 10 years ago now. And the pitch to me was you're going to get an opportunity to build an arena using everything that you've ever learned about presenting our sport. And we're going to try to do it in San Francisco. It was audacious. It was a crazy dream. But the whole idea was to create San Francisco's first world-class arena, first in its history, and set the Warriors franchise up for success for decades to come. So a big vision, impossible to do in a city like San Francisco, impossible to do 100% privately financed with no public money. So it was a big dream, but these are some of the people that really made it come true.
I mean, it must have been exciting to, like, in some ways get out of your world a little bit and move over into the design world, right?
Thrilling. Like it was, you know, it was every day for 5 years, but the thrill never ended, right?
I love that. I love that. So what was your vision for this project?
Big. We
Big.
wanted people to look at this as best in the world. And it had to exceed everybody's expectations. We tried to take the best of everything we've learned from any other similar facility, but make it work for San Francisco in a way that it can only be here. And, you know, that meant, you know, the architecture, that meant the interior design, but it also meant the level of finish, the different products that we offered. We have a unique place in the world. There's nothing like it. And this building had to be reflective of that.
Absolutely. Okay, you guys get the job. So tell us how, first of all, a big gig, right? It must have been really, really exciting, especially, you know, since it's your love, right? Golden State Warriors. How did you then connect with Williams-Sonoma, and how did that relationship start?
Well, just to sort of back up and to reaffirm what Rick said a little bit, I mean, just the vision for this project from day one from Rick and from Peter and Joe and the rest of the executive team was just incredible, and something we were just incredibly excited to be a part of. But as you know, with Gensler being a firm that was founded right down the street,
right,
you know, by Art Gensler, I mean, this was an absolutely incredible opportunity for us as a firm, and even for Art personally, to really be involved in bringing this amazing project to life within the city of San Francisco and within the Bay Area. So, you know, I think that's something that we all have in common, right? Everyone on the phone. I think Williams-Sonoma, you know, bringing that local presence as well. It's something that we all felt, you know, we could really bring the best of our talents together, but it meant something to us as firms and businesses within the community to work with the Warriors on this incredible project. Right,
Monica, you were down the block too, right?
Absolutely. We're just a stone's throw away.
Unbelievable. I sort of I have chills just thinking about that. And that does, as you said, Jonathan, that does mean a lot. So tell us how you started this relationship with Williams-Sonoma.
Yeah, I mean, I think Jonathan touched on it a little bit. I think, you know, the fact that, you know, both Gensler and Williams-Sonoma were both, you know, kind of local to San Francisco made it extremely convenient. But it really, you know, was a partnership that the Golden State Warriors also had with them. And so all three of us together, you know, it really made the vision come to life. So I think the convenience of everyone being located there, you know, just made, you know, decisions, meetings, making the design really come to life that much quicker. So it really was a seamless process.
Okay, Monica, I have to ask you about this. So I understand that originally Gensler came to you, it was maybe going to be not for the entire project. And I understand there was a mock-up room and something called Project Blue.
Yes, we coded it as Project Blue because when we met with Rick, we were going to play the color blue, which was the Golden State Warriors signature color, really hard. And so we decided a code word for the entire project to keep it, succinct. We kept it as Project Blue. And I have to tell you, there was so much excitement around this project, Cindy.
Yeah.
And when Rick and team came over and spoke about it, everyone wanted to work on it. So that was a way for us to keep it really kind of very secret.
Wait, Rick, did you know that there was this code, Project Blue?
Well, eventually, but they're pretty good at keeping secrets. But Cindy, I would say one of the things that made this work, we're not really about the resumes. The commitment from the top of both of these organizations was extraordinary. From Laura Alber at WSI, Art Gensler himself. This was a project important to our city, right? And it would live for decades. These things are not sports arenas. These are places where memories are created for generations to come. Cindy, what was the very first concert that you saw?
Oh, James Taylor.
Where were you?
In New York.
Where?
Madison Square Garden. Yeah, so you remember it.
And 99 out of 100 people can answer that question because what happens in these buildings really is part of our lives and shapes us in ways that very few other things do.
Right, I get it. Well, so the one thing that is a little bit surprising on the design side, that's an amazing story that happened right here, is that Gensler folks, you answer this, you wouldn't necessarily, first of all, go to just one vendor, and also you wouldn't necessarily think of Williams-Sonoma as doing the kind of custom work and the kind of collaboration that actually ended up happening.
No, absolutely. I mean, this is a very unique process and situation for us. I'll speak for Edith and myself. I don't think we've ever been involved in a project where we've worked so closely with one vendor to deliver so many spaces and so many design concepts. There's such a variety within this building, a variety of experiences, a variety of spaces, a variety of styles. And I think at first, quite frankly, we were a little hesitant and wondered if one vendor could truly bring not one vision to life, but bring a dozen different visions to life.
Right.
And I think that's something that we really pride ourselves on in the design of these buildings. That, we really try to create unique spaces that are really catered and tailored to an individual guest experience, a certain fan experience. Everybody's looking for something different, a little bit unique within these spaces. And so when we approach those, obviously we're looking for variety. We're looking for that diversity of offering, diversity of feeling within a space. And so, that was certainly something that we were maybe a little concerned about. Could one vendor help us bring that to life? And Edith can get into a little bit more of the detail, but needless to say, I think that's one of the things that we've been so incredibly pleased with in terms of this collaboration, that was able to happen.
Well, Monica, tell us first about, in that mock-up room, you just went all out, right?
So here's what, it was interesting. It was a very different project for my team and myself to embrace because, few people know this, but Williams-Sonoma's brands, we design over 90% of our products in-house, right? And so we've got a design team that is absolutely skilled at furniture, dinnerware, you name it, textiles, all of it. So designing a product and putting it into a home space or a space that has all the products like that of a home or interior space is very natural for us to develop and build. And when this project came our way, we wanted to really show to both Gensler as well as, of course, Rick and his entire group that we were capable of doing the diversity of product and diversity of style. So we set up this mock-up fake room called the Project Blue Room, and we invited everybody to come see the vision and the diversity of product. And that's how that started. And then, of course, Gensler had done amazing designs that we then adopted and built into the spaces as we progressed in the project.
Yeah, so Edith, was that sort of surprising when you get to this mock-up room and it's like, oh my God, every attention to detail is here and much more than we had expected?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think, they really went all out because, as Monica mentioned, it wasn't just, their furniture, but it was down to the textiles, it was down to the rugs, to the lighting, pillows, dinnerware. They even embedded the logo in the glassware. So it was, every little detail was really thought out, and we were, really pleasantly surprised by it.
Monica, I had to check my backpack as I was leaving because I was trying to stuff all these wonderful things in my backpack when I left.
Wait, Rick, so were you excited about that?
Well, it's just so cool.
Yeah.
This is what we live every day, and to see, the energy and creativity to bring your brand to life is thrilling, right? And
Yes.
and to have so many talented, smart people focused on it and doing things that we could never have imagined or been creative enough to do is, I guess that's the magic of why it works.
Yeah, absolutely. I was curious, as for you, Rick, is that so what is that like? You're working with this amazing design team at the same time you're leading a championship NBA franchise. It's sort of like, how do you do that?
I do not recommend it. All right. So it's really hard unless you've been a part of a sports organization to understand the effort that you're asking your people to make to go to the NBA finals. You play a whole season, go through all the playoffs, go to the NBA finals, not once, twice, 3, 4, 5 consecutive years while this project was going on. Everyone had 2 jobs. They had the job they had to get done to make our basketball game experience as great as it could be, but they had a second job. Everyone had a job related to building a brand new arena. So it was hard. I mean, I won't kid you. There were it was really hard for our staff, but at the same time, the carrot that was at the end there was so magnificent that I think everyone could get up every morning and be thrilled to think they were going to be a part of creating this.
Yeah, for sure. And yes, you cannot get away from pain with design, but usually on the other side, it's much, much better. All right. So Jonathan, this was a very big project. So tell us about the scope of how big it was.
So, I mean, any sports project is a big project. When we're dealing with an NBA arena, when you're talking about putting 18,000, 20,000 people in a building, I mean, these are large buildings, but, in terms of square footage, compared to an office building, it's not out of the question in terms of the scale, but it's that diversity of the space within this building that is, incredibly unique to the building type. And quite frankly, I think the Warriors pushed this beyond anything that's been done before in terms of the diversity within the project. So, this isn't about designing one space or designing 2 or 3 different spaces. This is about designing 30, 40 different spaces, and it has everything in it. We're not talking just clubs and suites. We're talking restaurants, bars, other amenities, concourses, the grand lobby spaces, which are 2 of my favorite spaces in the building, are just spectacular civic spaces, quite frankly. But then we start to look at the idea the team offices are in here, the practice facility is in here. So it's an incredibly diverse building with a lot of different users, different user groups and experiences within it. And quite frankly, that's the beauty and the challenge as a designer to get to work in that diverse setting. But at the same time, it all has to come together as a cohesive whole. It can't feel like it's a collection of 20 or 30 different spaces that were designed at different times by different people. There has to be something that brings that together. And Rick talked about it earlier on. It has to embody the spirit of the Warriors organization, but it also had to embody San Francisco and the Bay Area in a very sophisticated way as well, and bring that feeling of community to the guests.
Yeah, and Edith, tell us specifically what some of those spaces were, like the courtside lounge is one. Give us the other areas.
Sure. Yeah. There's such a big diversity. So, if we start from the bottom of the building, you have these courtside lounges, which are, private suites. And what makes them so unique is that they're, kind of underground. You have your own private kind of bunker suite wall that really is showcasing what you would see from your courtside seat. So you have the ability to watch the game from your own suite or go to your courtside seat. So you really have a lot of flexibility. You know, they have their own bar located there, you know, food display. So they really have all sorts of amenities within their suite. And then they have a wine vault that is really an amenity for all the suite holders. So, you know, they each have the ability to have their own wine refrigerator with a wine tasting table that is really a one-of-a-kind piece with a live edge, you know, custom tabletop. And then, yeah, you move up to the building, you have a bunch of different suites. We have the theater boxes, which, you know, to me, it's one of my favorite spaces because it you know, really, you could really be within the club, and it's kind of dark and moody, has this Art Deco feel. And then when you want to go watch a game or a concert, you go to your loge box seat. And those are, you know, really beautiful custom chairs that Williams-Sonoma also provided. And you really feel like you're just in this very sophisticated lounge chair versus just sitting in a standard stadium seat. So, you know, those are just a few of the spaces. And I feel like, you know, there's just so much more. I could keep going on and on.
Wait, Monica, tell us, because you were telling me that it was super fun to work on the live edge tabletops.
That was a special project. We had to go completely off campus to source these and develop them. And I actually flew to go see the actual wood and pick the slabs and you know, make this table happen. So that was an exceptional sort of conversational piece that we had all collaborated to build on. So I enjoyed that part. But what was like really the most fun to do was the diversity of spaces that Jonathan has mentioned earlier, and the vision that Rick and Joe all had for this amazing one-of-a-kind arena, first of its kind ever, to have a level of luxury that was going to be accessible, but still speak to the ethos of what the Warriors and the Chase Center and all of basically San Francisco embodies. And so to get that level of luxury, I mean, we did some really high-end whimsical things. The taste level was amazing from everybody on the team that allowed you to really dream and build. So we had this amazing metal occasional table in the courtside suites that Edith mentioned, and that was reminiscent of a sequoia tree, you know, a redwood tree, really pretty. So we did that. We had cashmere throws, and I can't help but hold it up because here
I want to say, oh, gorgeous.
So this is the equestrian cashmere throw from Williams-Sonoma Home, and we did this really chic jacquard logo in it, right? So everything was very subtle and chic, and we went with a color palette that was a last-minute pivot, if everybody recalls that.
Okay, so Rick, tell us the "we're not doing blue" story.
I can't do it justice. Monica is the only one who can tell the story. She's the only one.
Okay, Monica. It's all yours.
It's all of us together, but I have to say that, you know, we were all marching down the path of the Project Blue with all our blues and grays. And we had our final meeting, and Rick was there, and so was Joe and Nicole, and it was the final sign off. Edith was there with us, and we were all ready to go. And all of a sudden there was a pivot because there was this beautiful Williams-Sonoma Aldous rug that was charcoal black and ivory. And Joe and Nicole responded to that in a big way. And they wanted to shift to that color palette. And that meant that we were, and not only that, we wanted to now put engineered rugs that were the actual Aldous rug in every space that we were going to be using running yardage in. So it was a very interesting pivot. We all sort of took a big, deep breath after that meeting. And I remember having a conference call, all of us going, are we really going charcoal, gray, and ivory?
Tell everybody out there who Joe is and Nicole.
Okay. So Joe is the chairman and primary owner of the Warriors, put together the group that bought the Warriors. I call his wife, Nicole, our CTO, our Chief Taste Officer. And she lives up to every bit of the billing in terms of really having, you know, exquisite taste, and was a big influence on the project, and formed this amazing partnership, especially with Monica on the furnishings, that really was unique and special, I think, to this. But it clearly is reflected in the final product. And there were some twists and turns, and I know Monica was never worried about whether everything was going to get delivered on time for opening night. She never worried for a moment about any of that. So those were her sleepless nights. All Nicole and Joe had to do is say, yeah, let's pivot colors. Let's just change those.
But you were also saying, Monica, that they were thinking, okay, so I always think of Gensler's like amazing, right? They can do brand like nobody can do brand. They are unbelievable. And so you think branding, let's do blue for the Golden State Warriors. Now, you all, Joe, Rick, you guys were thinking, well, there's going to be other events besides that there, right?
Yeah.
And so you,
yeah.
Yes. Yeah, so you were thinking that maybe we shouldn't go kind of thematic with the blue, right, Monica? Is that kind of what happened?
That's where it happened. And I have to give a lot of kudos, like Rick did, to Nicole. And she's got amazing taste. And she was a wonderful partner, collaborative, fun. And when we made that pivot, it was really based on that this arena is going to be used for a lot more than just sports games. And so how do we make it really super chic and not predictable? And there was a level that she wanted to take it to that really opened up for all of us, Gensler, for the Chase team, Warriors team, and for us at Williams-Sonoma, a whole new way of thinking. And at that minute, we all just said, okay, we're going to run fast, but we're going to chase the extraordinary. And we're going to do everything completely and entirely different. When you have the power of 8 different brands with you, the answer is always yes, we can. So whatever your dream is, you say, yes, we can.
Right, Monica, so tell everybody, because you actually used 8 different brands for this project, right?
Yes, we used Williams-Sonoma Home for a lot of the upholstery and furnishings, and the rug was, all this rug was the impetus for all of that. All the cashmere came from there. The accessories and the Wells chairs and things like that came from Pottery Barn. Then we had, like in the restaurants, we used the West Elm Slope chair. In the family area for the teams, we used PB Kids and PB Teen. We used that product. We had Rejuvenation for the Cobb bar stool that we used in another space. So it was really a blend. I mean, I had Mark and Graham for like giftables and clear trays. So we used every single one of our 8 brands to make this amazing vision that was so diverse. Jonathan's spoken to it, Edith has spoken to it. And our role was really to provide and build it and make it the vision what everyone wanted it to be. And I think we had a lot of fun at the end. I believe that when that excitement and that adrenaline kicks in and you're like, I've got to deliver this, we all did this together. And there were sleepless nights and there were crazy calls where the rug wasn't matching up and oh my God, we're going to make it. And we made it.
Yeah, absolutely. Wait, Jonathan, as a designer, and Edith too, as a designer, were you surprised at that what Williams-Sonoma could do just in terms of the breadth of the product? I would think that was sort of an education.
Yes, definitely. I mean, it was definitely surprising, but I think, again, once they showed us that Project Blue room, I mean, that really showed us their capabilities. And even within that room, you guys were showing a bunch of different brands. So for us, that was just really a great starting point. And the fact that they could customize some of their products to really fit into our spaces with not just the dimensions, but down to, the finishes, the fabrics, adding any kind of embedded logos. I thought that was also a really nice touch.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, you think of the Chase Center big, like the scale is so big, and yet you're talking about, a small logo embedded into a cashmere throw. Don't you love that?
Yeah.
That's design, Rick. That's design.
I think that's what sets this project apart from many of the other sports projects that we've worked on, and quite frankly are out there around the leagues. I think that attention to detail, not only that came from the design team in Williams-Sonoma, but I think from the Warriors themselves. I mean, that was the expectation, that every single item within this building, every experience within this building would be curated. And I think that shines through not only in terms of the design of the spaces and the products within the spaces, it comes down to the staff and the way the building is operated and run. It's that entire hospitality experience that really comes to life. And I think that really is something that's very, very unique to this organization and building.
Absolutely. So Rick, let's talk a little bit more about that. How has the design of all these new spaces helped to drive a really great guest experience?
Well, you talk to our staff, that's the very first thing that is the goal every morning, is looking at everything we do through the eyes of our guests, and making sure that the decisions we make and how we present ourselves, how we show up every day, provides the best possible experience. And, when you have the place that we have to do that, I love Jonathan talking about the grand lobby, which is something that I fought for forever. It's very hard and expensive and takes a lot of space, but it is such an amazing welcome to the building, and feels in the moment of being like such a scene setter for what you're going to experience in every aspect of what happens. So you probably wouldn't expect in a sports arena to see a huge Calder sculpture mobile hanging from the ceiling in your main lobby through a partnership with SF MoMA. That's unexpected. And the finishes, everything that the fan experiences, whether you're going to a concert or going to a game, is special and different than what they've experienced before. And that differentiation, is led by the physical experience that they have, the things that they see and the things that they touch. And it makes a difference in how they feel about attending the event.
Yeah, so what does it mean to the Warriors?
Well, I think, we have been lucky enough to be a championship organization in 3 out of the last 5 years. And that's our aspiration, right? That's how we want to be seen. And we want I want people to know that the experience they're going to have attending a Warriors game or going to Chase Center, attending a concert, is going to be one of those memories that they're going to have, an experience that they're going to have. And it's certainly influenced by whatever the performance is that happens there. But it's not, that's a part of it. That's not all of it. You take away 100 other different impressions from the time you arrive to the time you leave that have you creating in your mind what the Warriors are. And these are the people who created so much of that image, so much of that experience.
Yeah, Jonathan, you work on other, sporting kinds of projects. What was you guys have all said it in a way, but what was the most unique part of this project?
Well, I think we touched on it a few times, but I think, yes, this is the home of the Golden State Warriors, but I think from the beginning, this was really seen as being a give back to the city and the community. This wasn't just about the Warriors as a team, as a brand, as an organization. This was really something bigger. And not every team thinks that way. Not every ownership group thinks that way. And I think that was something that really intrigued us, interested us, and got us excited from day one on this project. And it was something that was resonated and reminded every single meeting, every single call, this was about something bigger than just the team and the organization. And I think that has made its way through the large spaces, but it's also made its way, like we've talked about, down to that detail, whether it was a detail about a piece of furniture or, the silverware in the space, or whether it's about the food and beverage offerings within the space, or it's about the way that the employees are dressed or greeting the guests as they're walking in the building. Every single little detail really makes this a project that is of the city and for the city, and not just about the team. And that was just an incredible and a pretty unique experience within the sports world.
What did Art Gensler say?
Art was amazed. I mean, Art's been a great champion in terms of the sort of sports projects that we've worked on over the years. He's a big sports fan. He in his earlier days, he played a few sports as well. But
he's a tall guy. He's a tall guy.
Yes, he was actually a rugby player, though, surprisingly, not a basketball player.
Interesting.
But to build a project like this in his backyard was truly a remarkable experience for him to see that come to life. And, you know, again, not just because it was about the team, because it was about giving back to his city. And I think that was an incredible thing for him.
I was talking to Monica yesterday, and there are a lot of people in this project. It takes a lot to get something like this done. And collaborations can start a certain way and end another way. And yet all I've heard have been, you know, positivity, positivity, positivity. So having a great collaboration is so tricky to do. Monica, why do you think it ended in such a good way?
You know, I think it started with a great point of view and a lot, I keep saying passion and the desire to create something that no one had done before, which that vision came from the Warriors team. And I feel like they set that bar so high, and Gensler had already built such an amazing vision to deliver that. So we all were driven by that same level of professionalism, desire to excel and build this dream. And when you're building is a positive thing to do, and creating is a positive thing to do. So, I mean, how lucky are we that we're all getting to collaborate on something that's one of a kind? So I think the desire was just to create and deliver and, you know, make that dream come true.
Sometimes when designers are done with a project, they're on to the next project. It sounds like you're happy there for a while, huh?
We're going to be here for a while, and you know, that it's going to be a gift that still people are going to learn about, right? Because we had 6 months, and then we had to tell everybody to go home, and we haven't had an audience in Chase Center for 6 months. So I can't tell you how excited we are and how we're working every day to talk about how we're going to bring people back. And we're using this time to do a lot of things that we can't talk about yet because they haven't been announced at Chase Center, because we're trying to improve it even in this crazy time that none of us can go experience an event. So I will say, Cindy, you clearly weren't in all the budget meetings when you described how perfectly everything went.
They're not telling me about that part, Rick.
I'll tell you the truth. No, it's actually very, very instructive, because there were 200 times in this project where we got to a point where, you know, here was the vision, here's what it would take to deliver the vision, here's what would cost a little less, and here's what would actually be in our budget. And those meetings were extraordinary because we never wavered from building the building that we wanted to build. It's why it's the most expensive building ever constructed, and probably triple our original budget when we started out on this project. But everyone looks at it today and said we did the right thing.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, when I think about sports, I think about pride, right? And now you have a home that everyone can be so proud of, that's completely aligned with how elevated the Golden State Warriors are. And so it's going to be so exciting, as you say, to have everybody back, right?
Yes, yes, yes. Can't wait.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to thank all of you. It's been so much fun. First of all, Williams-Sonoma, what an amazing gift for our good friends at Gensler to really be able to work on a project together like this. And Jonathan and Edith, thank you so much for, you know, being such an extraordinary part of this project. Monica, you are unbelievable. Monica was talking all about you, Rick. So we're going all around in circles. But I do want to thank you all for an amazing collaboration to a team that's beloved to so many and to so many championships. Design is about winning, all right? You know, thank you all. Rick, it's really been a pleasure, since I don't get to ordinarily talk to somebody like you, but I feel the kinship and the love.
You're an awesome host.
Oh, thank you. Monica, what were you saying about him last night?
Well, here was my words. I said, anybody who meets Rick loves Rick.
There you go. And I said, could I say that? And she said, yes.
Totally. But, you know, it is such a special project, and thank you. And thank you, Cindy, for this platform, for all of us to get together and see each other. And I want to just also take this minute to say this is about a giant team that I get to represent that helped this come true for Williams-Sonoma. So I am in a terrific position of strength because there are so many people making this happen in our organization.
Lots of love, and get everybody back in there when you can. And God bless everybody. Let's get to the other side of this, okay?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you so much. Great seeing you all.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us for The Value of Place, Brands and the Human Experience, hosted by Corgan. This is the 6th year for Metropolis's Think Tank series, a thought leadership program that visits top firms in North America. We launched the virtual version of this program in August, visiting with firms from San Francisco. In September, we were hosted by firms from Chicago, in October by Miami firms, and in November by Houston firms. Now in December, we're in Los Angeles. Today, we're very pleased to be hosted by Corgan, who will be exploring the ways architecture and interior design could layer on to the virtual realm to frame a cohesive brand experience, solidify connection, and attract new loyalty. It should be a very interesting discussion. The next 2 weeks are Think Tank Thursdays with sessions hosted by AECom and Rap Studio. Hosting an event like this requires the support of great firms like Corgan, as well as our amazing sponsors. We'd like to thank Etc., the right mix of attitude, style, and products to make your work style meet your lifestyle. GKD Metal Fabrics, aesthetics meets functionality. Growy, designing and engineering innovative water products for bathroom solutions and kitchen fittings. Knoll Textiles, modern perspective, performance textiles. Loftwall, manufacturers that bring focused spaces to life through data-driven design. Material Bank, the largest material marketplace for sampling in the architecture and interior design industry. And Versteel, a solutions provider for American-made furnishings for working and learning environment. And now I'd like to introduce today's moderator, Metropolis's editor-in-chief, Avi Rajagopal. Avi?
Thanks, Tina. And thanks everyone for joining us today. Today we're talking about a really interesting topic, the evolution of brand experience and how brand and the human experience can come together to create the value of place. Brand loyalty is not something we've understood as something that can be built entirely through this relate and respond to each other. We create our sense of connection and purpose through really we touch and feel, we see, we hear, and we form emotional connections to people and things and places. In today's world, especially this year during the pandemic, as we've had a major shift in the places where we work, where we shop, where we play, where we live, this idea of how we form a sense of belonging to brands, to companies, to services has really come into question. And our connections with brands, of course, are twofold, if we might say so, both as consumers, as people who take advantage of services or products or offerings that brands provide, but also as employees in the forms that we connect with the companies and the organizations that we work for, with the teams that we work in. So today we're going to discuss how architecture and interior design can come together with the virtual realm to form a cohesive brand experience, to solidify our connections with each other and with organizations, and also to attract and retain new loyalty. To talk about that with us today, we have Sean Kim, who's the Interior Studio Leader and Vice President at Corgan. Sean, thank you so much for joining us today. We also have Stephen Dumas, who is the Principal at Parity Consulting. Stephen, it's a pleasure to have you today with us. And Paige Terrell, who's the Director of Branded Environments and Vice President at Corgan. Paige, thank you for joining us so much. Sean, I'd love to start with you. Corgan is currently working on this really comprehensive initiative with Kaiser Permanente, which is, one of the largest healthcare providers in this country and certainly one of the largest on the West Coast. And it is about creating and defining a cohesive brand experience for Kaiser Permanente. Tell us a little bit about that, and tell us about how interior design practice, which is of course the practice that you lead at Corgan, ties brand and human experience together.
Thank you, Avi. First of all, thank you for this great opportunity for us to get together in this crazy, unprecedented times that we're all enduring. And it's great to see so many people from all over the world, and hi to Alia. So I think the most important thing about this entire project is about connections and really bringing people together and making sure that they have this consistent branded experience. And for Kaiser, brand isn't just, they look at brand in two ways, which one is brand marketing. It's sort of the external marketing, what you see in TV, in magazines, and sort of marketing in a more traditional way. But when they talk about brand, at least the group that we're working with, it's really about the brand experience, the member experience. They call them members. As you know, that Kaiser is really vertically integrated in terms of they've got the insurance, they've got the facilities, and of course then they've got the staff. And so it's really working with them. We really had to understand not only the practice of what they do, and they do have hospitals, they have clinics, they have minute clinics, they sort of run the gamut. And obviously there's a traditional healthcare, but also now telehealth and virtual healthcare, which has become incredibly important. So, so this project is looking at in terms of it in 4 different ways. The first was really to get our arms around what is the brand, what is the current guidelines. They have a very robust facilities design program, and they have very robust facilities, approximately 35 professionals who really govern and really manage all the facilities and all of the guidelines. Quite a bit of task. So I'm sure all of us have worked with big brands and their guidelines. Sometimes they're pretty brief, sometimes they're really long. But if you put 2 architects or designers in the same room, designing the same building with the same guidelines, you're gonna get 2 very distinct interpretations. So just imagine Kaiser has over 700 facilities, and they have a relatively small compared to how many facilities they have of architects and designers. So every time they do something, it'd be a new variation, new innovation. So with this project, they really wanted, as they grow, they're in 8 different regions. They started in Northern California. Obviously, Southern California make the bulk of it. They're in the Northwest. They're in Hawaii. They're in Colorado, Georgia, Mid-Atlantic states, and DC. But obviously, each of the regions have its own interpretation, and then each city has its own interpretation. So it's creating a lot of variety and diverse interpretation of what the Kaiser brand is. So this project was really to create that one consistent experience, making sure they connect with the communities they serve. So the first part was really about discovery and visioning. And for the last couple of months, we have been very intimate with not only the facilities folks, but also the project managers and the people, the key leaders who really govern their brand and their facilities. So now, and we created an innovation report. And now we're in the middle of the design. There's 3 different phases: the public, the amenities, and the care encounter. And then the third phase is really part of the task for us is not only really evolve the current brand, but also create this interactive, user-friendly, intuitive tool that is beyond what they currently have. And so we have brought in an interactive designer to create this tool. So that's phase 3. And then phase 4 is really the implementation tour. They have a group of approved vendors and architects and designers called PPP. And so we'll be reaching out to them region by region, really walking them through what is a new brand, what is the new guidelines, and then really show all the suite of tools that they have. It's going to be very different than what they had before. So we are incredibly excited. And not only are we just working with our healthcare studio and of course interiors, but we brought in Paige from Branded Environments. Obviously, strategy has been really a critical part of this work, especially the phase 1 of discovery and visioning. They'll also be taking care of our change management, sort of bookending the visioning and the change management. We have an in-house media lab. They really are in-house production team, anything from AR to VR to 3D renderings to TV productions, podcasts. Really they're going to help us to tell the story of the new Evolve brand and tell the story of Kaiser and to really help us to navigate this interactive tool. And then we also brought in a consultant, 900 pounds, who'll be doing the actual interactive design. And then Steve, who's on our panel, we worked with Westfield and Steve on not only on retail projects, but also airport projects. And because one of the things that's really, really important to Kaiser is that they really see that retail is king and creating that not only memorable experiences, but really using design to really drive that memorable experience and create a sense of place. So it's a pretty comprehensive, and we are super excited to be collaborating with them. And it is a true collaboration. I think yesterday we had 6 meetings with them. At the end of the day, we were like, we love you, but we've had enough of you.
I think there's first of all, it sounds like a fascinating project. And I think it's a really great example of exactly the kind of thing we're talking about in today's panel. So, just to emphasize a couple of points that you brought up, Sean, first of all, we're talking about a very large brand with a presence all over the country, right? And for, just even in regular times for a smaller brand, making sure that brand guidelines are followed is a challenge, as we all know. I think your point about different interpretations of brand really, is important for us to take note as we continue this conversation, is because, it's about how do we create a framework that allows for some interpretation, obviously for local relevance, but also allows for consistency. I think the consistency idea is really interesting, especially in today's time, as you pointed out. No organization, whether they're in healthcare or they're just, a corporate office or they're in whatever sector they might be in, no organization is all physical or all digital now. Everybody's living in a hybrid realm, including retail, and even our organizations, I think, have the organizations we all work in or our other clients all have a challenge here in terms of, the consistency between the physical experience and a digital experience. And I think that's really interesting too. And also, of course, at least with the physical experience, those 600 facilities are being designed by architects and interior designers. And now, with the digital experience, you have a whole other skill set coming in who may not even think about space in the same way. So it's really interesting, right? So how does one address all of that? And then I think your last point there about why it was important to bring inputs from retail and other fields into the project is really key as well, right? It's about relationship building and it's about connection building, and that's what you started off with. You said this is all about connection, and so I think that's really it's the biggest problem in this space that one could have in a way, right? So it's like the mega problem, and it's really interesting to hear how you're going about it. Stephen, I'd love to bring you in here. Coming off of those last few points that Sean spoke about, how are people's expectations changing when it comes to brand experience? And how do we address that through interior design and architecture, both, people's expectations as consumers, but also as, employees or staff or members of an organization. How are they expecting, what experiences do they find fulfilling, and what experiences do they find long lasting today?
Great, thank you for the question. I want to just introduce myself a little bit. Paired Consulting is a firm that collaborates with different architecture design firms. So I'm working currently with Corgan on this exciting project. I've also worked with OJB Landscaping and SOM, and also still with Westfield. I was a design executive for Westfield for 20-something years. And in doing projects through Westfield, I collaborated with a lot of design firms and different interior design firms, and it's always that gel of different viewpoints, different ideology that kind of comes together and creates a kind of exciting project. And I've become a bit of a sort of consumer branded experience expert as Westfield under. We were the first shopping center company to brand themselves, right? And this was 15 years ago. It was even longer in Australia. And all of a sudden, when you put your name on every single one of your products, right, what does it look like? What does that brand stand for? You have to kind of figure it out, right? So we did a lot of those kinds of exercises. What does the Westfield brand mean? How do we then convey it on 100 different properties that were all designed at different times in different ways in different regions, and so that's part of the value that I bring to the exercise we're going through today. But the biggest thing for us was to get the entire organization to start thinking that they weren't just building or developing or leasing a facility, right? They were creating a consumer product. And once you make that switch, right, once you put your name on it, you are delivering a consumer product to your customers. And just like a car or anything else, you really have to kind of think through the whole experience, and that, and it goes all the way from the look and feel, but also to the, is it safe? How do we keep it clean? What are the kind of values that we're portraying in our brand? Is it a safe environment, right? So all those kinds of things come into play. And really, it starts with focusing on the customer. Who are they? What do they want? What are their values? Are you delivering what they want? We went through an exercise where we looked at all our properties, and we took the entire team that was working on the project and had them sort of pick themselves as a different customer type that they've, and had them experience them all from the parking lot. Where would that customer park? How would they enter the building? How would they walk through the building? Where would they shop? How would they go to the bathroom? All of it. And then really look at it like, are you delivering for that customer or not, right? And it was a huge eye-opening kind of experience for all of us, right? And I encourage anyone who's working on different facilities to go through it, because you learn a hell of a lot. And what that did was that really sort of gave us an action plan, right? Because what our end goal is to really create a product that resonates with the customer, right? If they call it their property, right? If it's their mall, if it's their health facility, right? If it's their medical office, kind of environment, if it's their hotel they like to go to, anywhere in the thing, you look at every kind of aspect of consumer or any kind of physical buildings, right? Every single one of them has looked at, how do I deliver a better product for my customers? I'll give you an example. The old Whitney in New York, right, was it was a beautiful box from the outside, right? And inside it was pretty much all about the art, right? The new building isn't the most, lovely to look at, but it has, interesting elevators. It has all these views out to the city. It has all these kind of memorable moments within the building and the journey as you go through it, right? So that's all about attracting customers, right? It's also about providing shareable moments, right? So social media has caused a huge demand for, that consumer product, right? And so give them something that they, attracts their attention. They take a fake picture of it, they share it, they include themselves, they take a selfie, all this thing, and they broadcast it around the world, right? So all of a sudden, that's a huge messaging thing, right? And so all sorts of companies and brands are now have been trying to capture that moment, right? Mm. And really, what everyone's trying to do is really get them to come back, right? Whether it's a healthcare provider, right? I really like this facility that they've just provided in my neighborhood. It might be a little further than my old facility, but I like it way better. It resonates with me. I feel like it's my own. And I've recommended it to all my friends, right? So all of a sudden that starts to build that kind of loyalty base, right? And that's what we're looking for. We've also done that with airports, right? We started with Chicago, the international terminal there, Terminal 5, and really sort of transformed it into a much more consumer-friendly environment, right? And most airports are designed to get the most number of people to the plane as quickly as possible, right? But that leads to a bit of I call it the sea of sameness, right? Every hold room looks the same. Everything looks the same. You can go to different airports. They all kind of look the same. Airport architects design the buildings, and they just want to get they want to get to their gate as quickly as possible and on the plane without the least minute of distraction, right? Most of the airport architects, right? But that's not who all the customers are. There's a customer who wants to shop and explore. And so we really looked at, when we worked on LAX, we looked at how do we kind of create a better environment for customers, for the passengers, to create an environment. How do we make them stay longer? How do we make that choice, that whether that's the airline or the terminal, that they want to continually keep coming back to, right, and fly. And so that one of the things we did there was we brought in local interior and design firms, right? Boutique design firms that would never have an opportunity at an airport, right? So did they design an amazing restaurant or an incredible shop or an incredible thing? And they bring in a unique sense of thinking, right? And they get it, and we had them brainstorm in each one of them and say, what does LA mean to you, right? And we got some really interesting ideas and solutions. And so the culmination of that is we recently redid Century City, Westfield Century City in Los Angeles, and it's an open air mall. Everyone thought it was the greatest mall and loved it, and da-da-da. But we knew that we had to take it to the next level, right? That the competitive edge, competitive marketplace, the digital competition is so strong. So we really worked to combine both physical and digital to create a new place. We brought in Kelly Wersler, who's a really very famous local interior design and globally famous interior designer. And she brought a whole nother sense of idea, right? We had Gensler doing the architecture, and Westfield did part of the architecture, the exterior and the base building. But the combination of those things created a really memorable environment, right? The furniture didn't look like any other mall furniture. The food court looked like a really great dining restaurant, right? With different kinds of types of seating, right? And it's all those places. At one point when we first opened it, I saw two very wealthy, very well-appointed women eating lunch in the food court, right? And even though it doesn't look like a food court, it looks like a restaurant, it's still essentially a food court, right? And I knew we had succeeded because we broadened the demographic of who was coming to the center, right? If you can do that, then you broaden your customer base and you give them an experience that they can enjoy. Hopefully that wasn't too long of a...
No, that was fantastic. I want to pull out just a couple of points that you made here. And first of all, thank you so much for laying all of that out for us in full detail. I think that's really important. And I'm already seeing some questions rolling in from our audience here. But Stephen, I think some of the things that you said, the way they add up to me is, I think all brands understand that they hopefully understand how they're unique in the marketplace in some way or the other. I think the challenge is, how do you convey that uniqueness in terms of space. And maybe that's something that's not always, as well understood by brands. And, when you're talking about the sameness in an airport, right? If one were to just set out to solve a problem, and one did it the same way over and over because it was the most efficient way of solving a problem, we would end up with all the same spaces, and we're not creating brand experiences. Your point about the Whitney, right? A museum, deciding what it is that you care about as your mode of connection with your consumers is really important. The Whitney said, circulation is our most important thing. We want to keep people moving through the museum experience, and they built a building around that, right? It wasn't just a procession of white box galleries anymore. And so that's really interesting to me as well. I think the other thing you said is, how do you convert what you understand as the unique experience of your brand into something that will connect with consumers and bring them back, right? And the last point you made about widening the demographic as well. So reaching people who you didn't think before were your consumers or haven't been able to reach successfully, how do you now reach a new audience? And I think that's really interesting as well. So there's just so many layers to this. So I just wanted to reiterate a couple of them, and I think the way you've laid it out is absolutely fantastic. And
if you,
Paige,
if you think about healthcare providers, right? The perception is most of their customers are older people, right? So how do they appeal to a younger audience, right? So the environment that you create and the amenities in it is the way to attract them. Yeah.
Exactly. Space becomes so important.
Yeah, Steve brought up a really great point, even in healthcare, specifically with Kaiser, because they've been so innovative in the past and they continue to innovate, was that they understood that they wanted to reach just beyond your typical healthcare. They really wanted to connect the community. So with the newer Kaiser facilities, it's called Next Gen, they have created what they call a public square, almost like a town square, where you have all of the amenities. You can come in. You don't necessarily have to be a Kaiser member to experience it. There's a nice cafe. Obviously, there's the pharmacy. There's the imaging, all the labs that you can just come in and go out, or you can go for your clinical experience or care encounter. But it was really important to have outdoor spaces, especially in Southern California. So Next Gen started in Southern California. That's going national. It's really important. So not only connecting with the community, but that by connecting with the community, you're creating future customers.
Right. Paige, I'd love to bring you in on that. Sean has just added a couple of other layers, right? We've been talking, mainly of experiences indoors within a building, in a space. Now we're talking about outdoor space. We're talking about, digital space. All brand experiences have been for some time now hybrids of physical and digital touch points. For somebody like Casa Permanente, who, have, I'm sure like all other healthcare brands, made a much bigger foray into telehealth than they already had. They were already in telehealth, but, a much bigger foray this year than before. There's clearly these brand experiences that we're talking about are very complex, and they're very layered and hybrid. How do you see that mix evolving from here on? What are some of the basic things that are going to be important, and what are some of the sort of newer perspectives that we're looking at when it comes to branded environments today?
Sure. Well, yes, thanks for having me too. I think that it's very interesting how the virtual world, it used to be, very much physical, and then it turns really quickly to all virtual. And then eventually we're going to have this hybrid, just like as we're working from home and working from our workplace, that type of thing. There's a little bit of back and forth, but I think there will be a blend of that. I think my first thought when you asked that question was just about consistency. I think it's when we've said it a few times already, but a lot of times the user is experiencing the brand for the first time virtually, through their phone or on their computer, through a website, through a shopping portal, through a virtual experience. Even we're seeing museums integrate tours VR and AR. You no longer have to leave your home to take a tour in some of these amenities and museums and such and exhibits. But I think the physical world is going to play a big role in drawing people from the virtual world back in. And just like we've been talking about all along, what can our physical environments do to really draw people back in? And it's all about that connecting, giving them something that's going to give them that sense of belonging, sense of community, that sort of thing. But the consistency to me is the big key. I need that virtual experience to align with the physical experience. I need the visuals to even be aligned. If I go and I see that, you know, the app that I'm using to maybe schedule my appointment for a healthcare, you know, a health visit, looks a certain way, and then I show up at the medical office building and it looks very different, I start to get confused. Am I in the right place? Is this what I'm supposed to be doing? It can be disorienting. So that consistency, I think, is really important, and that it's not just super high tech online, but maybe there needs to be some of that integrated into the physical environment as well. And then there's, of course, a whole nother layer of actually having digital components in the physical environment that people can interact with, which is probably a whole nother topic. So I don't know if that fully answered your question, but happy to elaborate. Oh, I think you're on mute.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, one would think that after doing discussions every Thursday for several months, I would not unmute myself. Paige, I think what you're saying about consistency is really interesting, right? Because as you said, in many ways, it's not just that our experiences are hybrid, but they're often digital first in this day and age. And I think that is really interesting, right? And if people's expectations of a brand are being set first in the digital space and then they show up, you know, I'm sure it's happened to everybody who's on this call at some point. It certainly happened to me where, you know, you're on a restaurant's website making a reservation, or you're, you know, making an appointment for a specialist or something, and you know, either the experience of that is really terrible, and you're like, is this the person I really want to be interacting with? And then you go in person and it turns out great, or God forbid, even worse, the other way around, right? So I'd rather have a bad experience on an app than in person, of course. But you know, it sometimes it happens the other way around. And then, so you know, the consistency in terms of the design of virtual space versus the design of physical space, I think is still really tricky. And, you know, many brands still struggle with that. So, you know, I think actually what you've said is really important. And, you know, the idea of digital first, I think, is really interesting as well in this day and age. I just want to thank Corgan once again for organizing this discussion, all three of you for joining us today. I also want to thank our sponsors, Etc. and Kimball, GKD Metal Fabrics, Growy, Knoll Textiles, Loftwall, Material Bank, and Versteel for making today's discussion possible. We're here talking about the value of place, brand, and human experience with Paige Terrell from Corgan, Sean Kim from Corgan, and Stephen Dumas from Parrot Consulting. The first question here, and Stephen, this is a question for you, but I think it might be interesting for everyone to weigh in maybe. Annie Ingraham asks, to Stephen Dumas, how do you measure or track customers in a mall setting environment or a hospital campus environment? What are the KPIs used to measure the experience of the loyalty? Do you measure time in the building? You touched on this a little bit in your opening remarks, Stephen, but I'd love for you to talk about that. And then Paige and Sean, I'd love to hear from you as well, you know, in terms of how do you measure success, or how do you gauge the success of the design of either a space or a branded environment? You know, just what are the KPIs there? Stephen, I'll let you come in first.
Sure. I mean, and also to add on to what you and Paige were talking about, it's about a sort of seamless interconnectedness between virtual and physical, right? Because you want it to just flow and be, you know, you can. You know, we designed Century City to be able to, you could sit in really great environments and shop online, right? You didn't have to even go into the stores, and then the product could be brought to you, right? That taking it to that next level, right? Is how do you make it so seamless that it works together? We talked a lot about at shopping centers, the old metric was sales per square foot, right? So this retailer is doing this per square foot overall, the mall is doing that. And we really wanted to change the way everyone working in the company, as well as our tenants and everyone else. It became about experiences per square foot, right? And so how do you track that? And by creating a strong loyalty program, digital loyalty program, you're able to start tracking that customer and how long are they there, where are they going, what are they using, what are they looking for, how do we make it easier, how do we offer sales, how do we make it more convenient? We're doing, Westwood was doing the same thing at airports, right? We're testing some things at LAX where, I'm traveling to the airport, I'm stuck on the 405. Can the phone start to say to me, my loyalty program, say, would you like to pre-order your coffee, right? Do you want it delivered at the gate? Do you want to pick it up at our stand, right? All those kinds of things. Would you like to pay for an expedited security pass-through, right? All those kinds of things. They can be a source of revenue, but it also can be a sort of convenience factor as well, right? When you start thinking about it, the holistic customer journey, there's ways of doing that, right? And looking at the kind of values in that.
Mm-hmm. And I can add a little bit of another perspective even. Two things come to mind. And initially, so we've done some research on airports and some healthcare environments where we've actually studied the user experience post move-in. We've done pre-move-in studies and then post where we're using things like eye tracking glasses to see what is catching the user's eye. Is it light? Is it movement? Is it a pattern on the floor? Is it something on the ceiling? What are people's eyes actually going to? It's actually pulled a lot of data. We've got a lot of good information with regards to both of those things: lighting, movement, colors, contrast, that sort of thing. And it's been a great tool to help us gather data from even different different demographics, and what are the children looking at? What are the older population looking at, given their eyesight? What's drawing them in? So it's really been informative from that perspective. So I think that's one of the pieces, and I've lost track of the other one, but I'll come up with it, I'm sure. Sean, you have something to add?
Yeah. Fortunately, Kaiser, they're really rooted in all of the solution is really based on science, data, and research. And so how they measure success, one of the ways is that they do a lot of research with their own customer base or member base. And so they know that the success of the most recent iteration of the brand was this next gen. They just recently did that study and proved that all of the integrated technology, the touchless check-in, the community space, the amenity space, it's everything that customers are really enjoyed and wanting. So that's creating this national initiative to go further. Number two, the membership is growing. So that's a number one key metric indicator, is that their membership is growing. And I think third is really these anecdotes that we hear. So one of the goals is that they obviously they want the brand to be KP, Kaiser Permanente, but one of the successes, one in Anne Arundel Valley, it's a project we did not do, but they consider that as their medical office building, right? They are just owning it. It's like, oh yeah, that's our building. It's not necessarily Kaiser. And also too, just personally, I was getting my haircut during one of the times when you can get your haircut. The guy who was shampooing my hair, and I just started talking about, hey, what do you do? I'm a designer working on this big project for Kaiser. He's like, oh my God, I go to Kaiser. I love Kaiser. There's a brand new building in Hollywood and Romaine. It's so cool. It's so well organized. People are so friendly. It looks so modern. It's so cool. I feel like I'm walking into a really cool mall. And I think those kinds of anecdotal evidence is what they want to hear. It's really the overwhelming response that they're thinking about healthcare in a completely different way, not institutional, but really looking at what Steve was saying in the same way. You know, follow the customer. What do they want? What are they really responding to? And I guarantee you, it's not just about getting a great healthcare. You know, what about all the times that you have to wait for your appointment? So with integrated technology, right, that they can tell you exactly how long your appointment's going to be. And they have similar, if they borrowed it from aviation, they have a dashboard that tells you exactly what your wait time is, where you need to go, just like you do in the airport. So I think people, we want that convenience. We want that digital technology interwoven into our life. And I think Kaiser's doing a great job of really responding to that and providing it. It's not everywhere, but it is, you know, they're definitely leading the charge.
Right. I think some great responses here. And Paige, if you do think of that second point that you're going to make, we'll catch up later.
I did think of it.
You did think of it.
Yeah, I was thinking of Steve. I was expanding on Steve's thought of, you know, different technologies that can offer you different services while you're in a certain facility, the geolocating type applications where, you know, you make your appointment through an app, you arrive, and upon arrival, it starts to tell you, it starts to trigger that sequence. Hey, you've arrived, please park in parking garage, you know, A, and make your way to the double doors. And it's tracking you as you go through. And then while you're waiting, it can say, you know, please make your way. These are some amenities that you might want to enjoy while you're waiting. Coffee, maybe you want to go shop for eyeglasses. Do you know about the pharmacy? Maybe you want to get a flu shot while you're there and you're waiting. So I think there's some things there that as people say, yes, I would like to do that. And, you know, they click on that and it takes them to that service. There's some connections there that can happen in those technologies with the physical environment that can start giving you some data.
Right. I think so. A real host of tools here. You know, you're talking about, first of all, companies themselves rethinking their metrics. Stephen, you started there. You know, talking about customer loyalty programs, and you know, really that as your first tool. Paige, I think, you know, you're talking about technology solutions, both technology solutions that might be specifically brought in, like eye tracking and things like that, that, you know, as designers, we might bring into a space and conduct a, you know, formal study, but also using existing, you know, technology solutions. So, you know, if there's an app, there's something that the organization is already using, there may be data from that can provide insights, you know, on how people are engaging with space. And then I think, Sean, to your point, you know, marrying that with, you know, just the routine research that organizations do, hopefully, all the time, as well as, you know, anecdotal information. So, you know, getting some of that storytelling in is also important. It gives you flavor and it gives you context. So all fantastic answers to, you know, how we set KPIs. Lee Hoffman asks, what has shifted for consumers in terms of what they're looking for in a branded environment? Retail, et cetera, beyond safety? Paige, maybe you want to step in on this one first, and then we can go to Stephen and Sean.
Sure. You said beyond safety?
Yeah, beyond safety.
It was. Yeah, I think it's, I mean, we live, I say this all the time, we live in an increasingly visual world. You know, we're so much stimulated by what we see, but there's also opportunities to bring in sound and smells, textures, things that are going to really kind of excite your senses, if you will.
I think one of the things customers are looking for is a curated experience, right? I don't have time to do all the research, so can you let me know? Can you inform me, right? So is it, you know, we always looked at sort of how do you create something that's always evolving, right? How do you get seasonality, right? That sort of brings something new and takes something out. New products, new offers, new things, right? When you look at that for healthcare, right? It's you know, seasonal testing or vaccines or shots, right? It might be new focusing on preventative care. So it could be like, you know, getting fit, healthness. We're looking at with Kaiser of creating shops that sell exercise equipment and running, kind of trackers and all those kinds of things, right? So it's always sort of surprising and delighting a customer that one says, "Oh my God, they're always thinking of me," or "What's interesting or new," right? They're doing the research for me and telling me what's hot and new. And then it's also like, "Oh, what a cool thing. I'm going to take a picture of it and I'm going to share it with all my friends," right, on social media. So it's those kinds of things that I think customers are looking for. And they want authenticity, right? They want it to feel like it's them, right? The more we're on our phone, the more we feel disconnected, or we feel guilty that we're not enjoying our life or our thing or anything, right? Our family, all those kinds of things. So how can you provide those environments and the content that really sort of does it for them, right? And we've seen through this current kind of crisis, right? Everyone's, in California, we've been locked down, I think, most of the time, it seems like, right? And in New York as well. And so people are, in a sense, are risking their lives to get human contact, right? They're sort of going and they want to eat at restaurants. They want to go to the sort of outdoor safe shopping centers, right? They want to go to certain things, right? Because they want that human contact. They want that physicality. They want that there's something to inspire all their senses. So I think it's in our nature that there's always going to be a physical and digital. And that's what in today's world, the more technologically advanced we get, the counter trend is always going to be, how is it more authentic? How is it more connected to me personally? How can I personalize it? All those kinds of things.
Yeah, I just want to tag into what Steve was saying is, as we get more virtual, and I think trend is going to be, right, as we're more concerned about safety, and we know that success of working from home, is that we're going to be wanting that personal human connection when we do go to a physical place. And that is something that Kaiser has recognized. So in every single facility, they did lots of research. They love the option of touchless check-in, but they still want to see a friendly face, even if they never talk to that person. So I think as brands evolve and navigate this world of touchless and digital, is that we have to constantly think about what is that human factor, human connection. Number two, it's about choice and control. Like, I want to be able to shop online, but I also want to be able to go try on that fabulous outfit that's on sale, right? And even in, like in Kaiser facility, that's something that we're providing is choice and control, right? It's no longer the sea of bus station tandem seating. They want to make sure there's a large community table where you can have a family, or in my case, when my mom was in the hospital, I had my rolls of drawing that I still needed to mark up. So I was literally putting together trash cans. So I had a surface to write on. And you want to make sure that you have power, you have Wi-Fi. Maybe you just want to be quiet. Sometimes when you're coming to a facility, you're not feeling well. Maybe you don't want all the activity of the public square. Making sure you have these choices, how you want to sit, where you want to sit. Do you want to sit next to a window? We know everybody wants a view to the outdoors, but it's just not humanly possible, right? And then third was my third one. I have to come back to that. But choice and control, making sure we have a human connection, and then I'll come back to that third one.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I love that we're ending on choice and control. When Stephen, you were talking about, curated experiences, I thought about Netflix and how, they had perhaps gotten a bit too curated at one point, and then they pulled back very quickly and started giving people curation and also choice. And I feel like those two things really go together, right? I don't want to be told what movies to watch. I want to be recommended some movies, but I also want to be able to see a wide array of choices that I can make for myself, right? And it seems like there's this real tension between completely curated experiences and consumer-driven sort of controlled or choice-driven experiences, and that's really interesting. And Paige, the multi-sensory idea. The human touch that Sean is talking about is one aspect of that multi-sensory. So while you want color and pattern and so on, you also want human connection. You want eye contact. You want to see a smile. It sets off some stuff in our brains. So I think it's really interesting. There's a danger in leaning in almost too much in almost any one direction here. It sounds like, and there's some really nice axes and tensions here in terms of what people are expecting. I have a question here from Mary Davis, and Sean, maybe you want to come in on this first, but I have a spin on the question that I'd love to get Stephen and Paige in on as well. Mary Davis says, Sean, how do you develop a color palette around branding that will still have a timeless feel 10 years later? Okay. And Stephen and Paige, I'd love for you to think about whether having consistency over 10, pursuing the timeless is even something worth pursuing. Does that pursuit is that something we should be aspiring to? Is that achievable? How do we do that? So Sean, first of all, how do you build a color palette for branding that feels timeless?
I'm sure everyone in the audience have experienced that color finish is probably the most controversial, hotly debated thing that we do. And so what we try to do is take the conversation away from, I like this, I don't like this, I hate green, I hate purple, that reminds me of 70s, whatever, So what we try to do is elevate it into a big concept, right? So it's really about not necessarily the palette itself, because you can do many variation. It could be just kind of a, more of a color study or objective, but it's really about tying it to a specific concept, because people can agree on a concept and people can, relax a little bit about, is that my favorite shade of green or not? Or, hey, if it becomes really hotly debated, sometimes we go to, everybody loves color of trees, right? Who doesn't like the color of water? So it becomes less controversial because, like smells, right, are visual. We have such connection to color. I don't know why. I guess it's really sort of our lizard brain or ancient brain that's really tied to that, right? Because color tells you, warning and stop and all of that stuff. And then I think going back to our strategy work, that we wanted to make sure, because they had such a history, right? They know what works, what doesn't, right? Really, rather than focusing about the past, let's really focus about the future. Let's create a concept or a guideline or guiding principle that's going to guide through all the decision making. So if the guiding principle is about, let's say, meeting all human needs, and part of that is being optimistic and vibrant, then you're naturally going to create a palette that's optimistic and vibrant. People can get behind that. So as we kind of move through design, where we're working with architects and designers who work for KP, right? They know healthcare. They've done this 100 times over. Trying to get them away from that conversation. It's like, hey, let's go back to the guiding principles that we unanimously agreed. This is the new measuring stick. Let's talk about, does it meet these guiding principles, rather than, do you like that color of green, or do you like that color of orange? So that's how we approach palettes, very carefully, but with a big picture.
Yeah, I think there's also an opportunity to think about if there is a client that's hesitant to commit in that regard, what can we do to make it easily changeable or easily updatable, whether it's through cost-effective things that can change and less permanent elements. I mean, it's an easy solution. I know we all probably know that, but I think that's something that we always look at, and we're really careful to say, if we use it, let's use it this way so that you can change it should your brand change. I mean, that's the world I live in every day. I think probably 90% of my clients right now are going through a brand refresh, and they're hesitant to use any type of color or even their logo being permanently displayed. So what if it changes? What if our values change and we need to redo it? So, I mean, we live in this world daily of flexible solutions, updatable solutions, or things that if they are implemented can be easily done and changed out later on without huge implications to the entire facility. I think that's just responsible with approach with our clients' money and our time, their time, everything. So,
right. I think you want to tell a story, right? I mean, you want to kind of wrap it up in a bigger thing. You know, what is the story for the project, right? And then the palette kind of works with that, right? In Century City, we wanted to go with all natural materials that would patina, right? We wanted it all to age and age over time. So anything that would develop a patina in a certain way, right? That's one way of achieving timelessness, right? In other projects we've done where we want to connect to that local city, right? We want to connect to that. And, you know, if we're doing an airport, we really try to connect what is the essence of a Chicago or a New York or whatever. How do we capture that in the stores and the common areas and those kinds of things, right? And if you capture that, then it automatically becomes timeless, right? That doesn't mean that you just design in a certain way. Like, you're not doing brick in Philadelphia, right? You know, just because it's, you know, a city of bricks, right? But you can introduce other elements that can change, right? It's a piece of furniture, it's an art piece, it's something else that can evolve and change over time that you can mix in and out, right? And that's where kind of pop-up events, you know, pop-ups, those kinds of things can keep things fresh within a kind of more traditional kind of palette. And it doesn't have to be traditional. You have to kind of look at it sometimes and go, will I like this in 10 years, right? You know, this may be a little too far out there, right? Or, you know, there's a certain chair that I'm like, you know, Sean's like, this looks cool. And I'm like, oh my God, every single mall did that chair for their food court for years. So that's really tired, you know? So it's a lot of it comes from your perspective and your, you know, where you've seen it used. So, you know, there's always a glass block, or there's always there's something that, you know, faux copper and stuff that just goes, oh my God, it's not ready for a comeback yet, right? So you try to look, you try to balance those kinds of things and look at, you know, is this gonna be the mistake of 10 years from now? So yeah.
I love that you said it's not ready for a comeback yet, because of course, you know, these things also, some things never come back, but you know, there's a lot of things that go through cycles. I think the three of you have really built a great picture here. So, you know, build that larger story. Sean, you were saying that, you know, like, get everybody behind the basic principles and, you know, get people off of some of the very personal prejudices by pointing to sort of universal principles that everybody can agree on. I think that's really key. I think, Paige, you know, as you were saying, think very strategically about parts that can change, you know, over time. I think that's really key as well. And Stephen, you said, you kind of talked about that, you know, paintings or investing your brand in things, or investing the controversial or the parts that you feel are changeable in things, in objects and materials that are changeable themselves, you know, in pop-ups, artwork or furniture and things like that, things that can be replaced or cycled out. You know, all great responses. We're here talking about value of place, both for brand and the human experience, with Stephen Dumas from Parrot Consulting, Paige Sherrill from Corgan, and Sean Kim from Corgan. It's been a fantastic discussion so far. We've talked about how we set metrics for experiences. We've talked about, how experiences are changing and how expectations are changing around experience. And now we've talked about, how we can work with time, as an element, which is really fantastic. Michael Suazo asks, there's now a large push for a hybrid work model for some employees working remotely and others working within the office during the pandemic. Have you had to tackle connecting the remote and in-person employees through interior design or architecture? If so, what ways have been most effective? Obviously all organizations have external and internal customers. So employees are, organizations need to connect employees together. Have you done any of that work? Are there things you're starting to think about in your projects in terms of how we keep staff who are in-house and working remote connected?
I'm thinking of the first thing that comes to my mind is more so not so much. So much of this is handled digitally and virtually, and just the culture that you have within an organization already that's really going to help that. But I think there are some things that you can do in your physical environment. This is a little bit of a different take on the question, I know, but to connect the physical environment to those people. I know at Corgan, we integrated some new art, and the idea is that it's going to rotate and change over time. And it really made me excited. I wanted to go in the office and see it and go experience it for myself. And as it changes and evolves over time, I think that's something too that we can think about in our environments is keeping them fresh and new, whether it's art or updatable elements. Digital is a great way to do it, but lots of other ways of accomplishing it. But what's going to change? What's going to cause me to go back, even within an environment, go to one place versus another place, get out of my silo, get out of my seat, go somewhere else. It's got to be something new and different that has updated. Have you seen the new blank over in blank? I want to go there and see it. So I know it's a little bit of a different take on that question, but that's kind of the first thing that came to my mind. And I know there was sort of this energy when people started coming back to the office at Corgan, and there was this art that had been installed, and people were saying, have you seen, for those of us that were back in the office, saying, hey, have you seen the art? Oh yes, it was so cool. And it created this buzz for those that maybe had not returned yet, and maybe encouraging some of those people to maybe start to work their way back into the office.
I think it's spot on.
I think, in this environment, prior to this, Westfield was working with sort of remote, working from home, remote, take certain days you could work from home, different things, right? That COVID has changed all that, right? Now, whether, not everyone's going to want to go back to the office immediately, but it has proved that we can work anywhere, right? So if there's a great, shopping center with a great place to sit and work, and I can sit there, right? Part of what we designed at Century City was to get people to come out of the office buildings that surround it and come and work in the environment that we've created, right? And I know that I'm sick of my house, right? Because we're all going to be sick of our houses at a certain point, and our kids, and so the last time I went to Kaiser Permanente, oh my God, they had a cool desk. There's a coffee place. It was quiet. I'm going to go there for a couple hours and get this thing I need to get done, and I'll be left alone. It'll be perfect, right? So I think it starts to blur the boundaries, right? We can travel more. Once we can start traveling, that's going to change the realm. I can work from anywhere I want, right? I can live wherever I want. I think it frees things up, right? We don't know how it's going to settle. It takes trust from an employer. It takes trust from, how we work together. Is everyone valuing? I think eventually you'll find out if someone's not really carrying their share, right? Their load, right? Just as much as if it was an office. But then we also need that human interaction, right? So if even if it's a couple of days a week, that you come in and you get that energy, you get that excitement, you get the exchange of ideas, things like that you can get just talking about it, or, sketching on a piece of paper and having someone go, oh yeah, what if we did this, or what if we did that, right? Those things are sort of invaluable, especially in this sort of design profession. Yeah.
And I know I've seen a shift even in this, in how we plan spaces. This is more specific to workplace design, but you know, if there are more people working remotely and they're coming into the office, maybe they're coming there to work in a group setting and collaborate. So maybe there's less desks and there's more, and we're seeing this already in some of our client solutions, where they're creating almost, I don't want to call it a war room, but, you know, kind of these team rooms where that's where they set up, they come in for a week and they work in that room together, and then they go back and do their individual work. And maybe a different group comes into that team room again, and that it's a little bit different of a little bit different working style than what we've traditionally seen. Everybody sits in their desk, and then we can move from our desk to a conference room or a collaborative area. But instead, we're just coming in just for that group work and then leaving. So how do the spaces support that?
And one other point, I think design, you know, design does matter, right? It definitely matters, right? And so whether you're working in an office for a brand, or you're working at the brand's location, or you're a doctor or a nurse at a healthcare facility, right? If it looks cool, if the customers are excited about it, right? If they're you know, excited about the design, that makes you more, you know, that keeps you where you are, because you become really proud of what you're providing in that thing. It makes you do a better job, right? Because you're keeping up that kind of brand's values as well, right? If there's a great looking restaurant, the staff are excited about it. They'll tell you about who the designer was if you asked about it, right? Those kinds of things, it's a natural occurrence of good design. And you know, and that doesn't mean that, you know, you can go provide a terrible desk for that doctor or that nurse, right? Or whoever, the provider, right? You still have to meet kind of nice standards and give them a bit of what you're giving the public, right? To uplift their experience. Then they feel part of that experience and engaged, right? I know on the shopping center side or the airports, if there's a great facility or a beautiful building, they're so excited about it. And the customers also treated a little bit better, right, than they would your average everyday mall or airport.
Right.
I want to see two things. One is it's life integration. Right now, we've gone like way on the other side. So with that, you know, we love all the ease and use of working from home, because you could do your laundry, but have a Zoom meeting. You can multitask where you really couldn't do at work. But the second thing is we have to give our employees choice and control. And they need to feel like that they have the freedom and the choice, the work they want to, maybe sometimes to shut off a little bit, because it's almost like we are, the minute, I know for a lot of you guys, right? The minute I turn on my computer at 8 o'clock in the morning, sometimes I don't step away until 5 o'clock. Sometimes I miss my lunch, because we have created this culture like back to back to back to back. And so I think we need to come to some sort of a balance, but as we return back to work, and we're going to be living in a more of a hybrid, a more of a fluid work world, where some of us will be working remotely part-time, some of us will have to come in. Thirdly, it's something that we are experiencing now, and it's a challenge to the audience. We have to figure out a way to be as collaborative, as creative as we were when we were meeting in person. We haven't figured that out yet, right? That idea that to be in a creative environment, you have to be able to be vulnerable. And to be vulnerable, you have to build the trust. And to build the trust, you have to meet the person face to face. And no matter how many Zoom meetings, how close I am, it doesn't quite create that. And so I guess if I take a step back, is how do we create that trust? How do we allow that for vulnerability so the creativity can happen? And so it kind of goes back to choice and control. You know, I think our expectation of employees always be on, or our clients always expect us to be on, you know, and so it's just a challenge for you guys to really think about and hopefully in the next think tank that we can talk about that further.
You know, I just want to prompt if anybody has any further thoughts before we go on with the questions. We have a little bit of time about this balance between, well, and Stephen, you spoke about this, and Sean, you said about choice and control, the balance between a space that is inhabited at the same time by staff and by, you know, outsiders or external constituents. The balance between the intention of the space, you know, does it serve both groups equally well? You know, very often, you know, the archetype of this is a restaurant, of course, where front of house is amazing and back of house is not, you know, and, you know, organizations often end up creating situations like that, you know, where maybe their retail spaces are fantastic, but their office spaces are not. And so I guess my question is, you know, we talked about consistency for brand experience over physical and digital, but I'd just love to, and Sean, you talked about, you know, external and internal. Can we just talk about consistency and the value of that for external and internal constituents, and really briefly, and then we can go on to the other questions.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Avi, because this is exactly what's been tasked for us, is that we're creating these guidelines to meet all human needs, but not just for the members, even though obviously the members are the focus, but for the staff and also for the providers. And that when you know, one of the guidelines we're looking at is My Workplace, not just for the doctors or the nurses, but what about the IT people? What about the admin? What about the C-suite? That you can't have all these multiple guidelines. It really needs to be one consistent guideline. So the experience from a CEO to the greeter that's standing at the front door has a consistent experience. And obviously that's a challenge, right? The CEO has a very different expectation and different budget, but we're creating at least a concept, a guideline that it says, hey, we treat everyone equally. Yes, the members are important, but yes, the doctors and the nurses and the staff, you guys are important too, because you have to serve those people, right? That being on stage, right? All that work, all that energy, we also need to create a space that is off stage that you can relax and you can refresh and energize for the next round of patients. So I think it's just a big challenge, and an organization like Kaiser is really thinking not just about the members, not just the front of the house, but really they're asking us to take a look at how do we create that consistency of brand internally and externally.
I think you have to look at each person coming to the facility. We do an activity where, in the very beginning of the project, where we say, who's coming to this facility, whatever the facility is, who's coming? You know, is it just employees? Is it just visitors? Is it children? Is it what age group? And create these sort of profiles and start to really dig into what are those people bringing with them? What's the context that they bring with them? What moods are they bringing with them? How can we change that? Really diving into almost, you know, a personality profile, if you will, and solving for that. And I think if you leave out the back of house person out of that discussion, you're really missing an opportunity. And I think it's important to, you know, talk about it openly and honestly, and find out what the organization plans to do in that regard, for sure.
Samantha Hughes asks, and maybe this is a question more for Steve, but Paige, maybe you have some comment as well. As a mid-sized manufacturer, we're working on transitioning to an e-commerce platform. Do you have any recommendations on how to create an engaging experience in the preliminary stages of our transition? So people who are stepping into digital retail for the first time, are there things that maybe people should keep in mind in terms of brand consistency or brand experience?
I think Paige hit on it earlier with sort of consistent look and feel, right? That it wants to be seamless, right? You know, we've sort of at Westfield we experienced some digital brands that started, and then they realized they can reach a much broader customer base by opening physical stores, right? Tesla is a great example. I mean, they're one of the top sellers whatever mall they go into, right? And they sort of rethought the whole, again, it's a consumer brand strategy, right? Where do you want to be? You want to be on a interstate turnpike or, off feeder road on a freeway? Or do you want to be in the mall where you've got all these customers walking by all the time, right? I mean, that was a sort of huge kind of change in that thinking, right? And, Bonobos, all these kind of companies that were Warby Parker, which started as sort of digital companies, all realized they needed a physical presence, right? At the same time, Nordstrom's has kind of looked the other way, where they, are a strong physical brand, and they've created sort of, I think it's called Nordstrom's Home or something. There's one on Melrose where you can go try things on. You can get prearranged shopping kind of things. You can order stuff online and pick it up there, try it out if you want, all those kinds of things, right? That convenience, right? So I think that's where, the world is. Westfield tried this thing where they were amalgamating different brands, creating a virtual shopping mall and virtual kind of connector of department stores and retailers and even advertisers or that kind of thing to create this kind of thing. And it's a difficult challenge, but it is necessary. I mean, you need both, and it needs to be seamless.
Yeah, absolutely. Sean, we have a question for you. Anne Ingram asks, can you expand on the subject of change management? As we're building this kind of brand experience, obviously people are going to experience some change. So can you talk about change management among the 4 phases that you described? And this was right at the start when you were talking.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, after our visioning and discovery session, and we started presenting our innovation strategy report, and I think it was like 3-hour presentation, right? I mean, it's just a massive amount of information. But within that, I think one presentation was like 175 slides and all of us presenting. One was about change management, one slide, because we wanted to make sure that as we put a button on the discovery phase, that, as we start to design and we created the roadmap, that we're starting to think, and we have to think about how is this going to be communicated? We know it's a huge change, not only for Kaiser, but for anybody in the audience who are PPP, working on Kaiser facilities. It is going to be, and as creative and innovative and forward-thinking that we think we are as designers and architects, we really hate change, specifically guidelines, because it's taken us a long time to figure out what it is, and now you're asking us to change again. And so we knew that idea was creating the desire for change, right? It's about not just like, here's the changes, it's what's coming. It's not just about communicating that, but it's creating that desire and the why we're changing. And I think that's been the biggest difference in terms of working with Kaiser, but also in terms of now we're going to be communicating to the PPPs or the designers or architects, and we'll be helping Kaiser really tell that story, is creating that desire for change, as well as your typical communication plan and all of that stuff. But I think they really understood and grabbed onto that idea, is that creating the desire. Okay. And I think part of it is making sure that all the stakeholders have a say and they've heard it. They haven't heard it for the first time. And, as we make these strategic reports, it's been great to hear people's feedback. Now they all understand the big story. And then as we move through design, we'll be continuing those the different stages of reporting up, if you will, and then that process will happen obviously to the architects and designers who work on Kaiser projects.
Right. I think it's really interesting. I'm almost envisioning these circles of stakeholders, really, from those who are closest to the project to those who are farthest out, and really carrying each set of people along where it's appropriate into the process and bringing them along. Thank you so much for laying all of that out. That's really fantastic.
If you think too hard about it, you can really freak yourself out because there's so many people involved and it's so complicated. And Sean has done an incredible job of keeping it together.
Anybody who's worked with Kaiser know that it is as a beast. I mean, it's an incredible organization. They're well-oiled. I mean, they have all the processes in place. They have wealth of resources. And so, you're working with highly professional, highly educated, and I think that's been just a really remarkable experience for us.
Right. Given that we've now talked about this massive change management process, this last question I think is especially appropriate. Mauricio Sobrino asks, in what ways can small brands or local brands benefit from the hybrid strategies that we've discussed today? We're talking about large brands here, but how are any of these ideas, whether it's branded environments page, whether it's interior Sean, whether it's, the larger brand strategies even, how can smaller brands, think of these, take advantage of some of these strategies?
I think I know that it's so important when you're small to go, and it's a perfect opportunity to start building that brand, that culture, all those things play into it. But starting small, it's the perfect opportunity to build what you want. It's so hard, so much harder if you're big trying to go reverse. How can you benefit from the hybrid strategies? I mean,
Paige, maybe think of like the startups that Corgan has worked with, people who are early in their journey as companies.
If I can add it a little bit, I think one thing would be, you're so busy doing your thing, getting your company going, right? That kind of entrepreneurial spirit, right? You've got to take some time to go off and think about what your brand represents and who you are focusing your brand on and those kinds of things, right? Because you can get distracted and you're so busy doing what you're doing, whatever it is, whether you're in retail or hospitality or anything, right? How do you really, you have to take the time every once in a while to kind of say, where am I going? What is my goal? Who am I delivering a product to? And what are its values? And that'll help you make all the decisions, right? In a sense, you're creating your own story for your brand, right? And as long as you have that goalpost, that's your, it doesn't matter whether it's a project or a brand yourself, right? It's the story. The story helps you keep going in the direction you need to go.
If I can offer one example, we do quite a bit of work with Facebook, both data center side and also on the interior side, that their brand, we all know the Facebook brand, but their culture, the internal brand is really, it's still a little DIY. It's lots of plywood. They like working with artists, local artists. It looks like a startup because their philosophy is they want to feel like they're always growing and evolving. And that's something that they've embraced, whereas other tech companies have really kind of grown up. They've kind of buttoned up, and Google has definitely moved on from their polychromatic image to a little bit more sleek and more sophisticated. So I think it could be just simple. I think kind of going back to the why. Who are you? Who are you as a brand? Who do you want to be? And then it could be simple as, I don't want to reduce brand to a color, but if that's the only thing that, if you're a startup, right, that, your color is yellow, so the interior, you have a big, huge feature wall on the wall with your logo, and your website is all about yellow, and your stationery, it could be something really simple as that can have a huge impact, especially in this digital virtual world, that could easily translate into, when you have a little bit more money, that yellow wall would be a digital wall that's yellow.
I think, go ahead, Paige.
Well, I was just going to say, I think the part of the question that was intriguing to me is how can you benefit? And I think your employees can benefit from that by really becoming passionate about who they work for, what they work for, by developing that mission or those visions, values, those sorts of things, and building consensus, building camaraderie, and everybody can kind of get on board at an early stage when it is strong. So if you do have like Steve and Sean are saying, you've developed this, you've put intention behind it, and share it with those employees and have them embrace it, and then it just kind of spreads. We at Corgan, we just kind of rebranded, and agility and design is been our mantra. And I mean, the word agility comes up all the time, and everybody's really embraced it, and it's become this sort of internal thread that's kind of woven us all together and built us stronger as a group, because we have this common vocabulary. As we go out in the marketplace, here I am saying it here. It's like I'm drinking the Kool-Aid kind of thing. I think it can create a sense of belonging with those employees, help with retention and attraction, those sorts of things as well. So I think that's the benefit.
I think that's a perfect place for us to end today's conversation on Paige, because ultimately that's, Steve, you said it right at the start. What we want is for people to come back. And whether those people are internal constituents like employees or external people like customers, we want people engaged. We want them in a story. We want them integrated, and Sean, when you were describing the change management process, that's what it's all about, right? We want to carry people along with the story, because ultimately, Paige, what you're describing is what we want. We want that story to multiply, right? To grow, to kind of become emotional, to have emotion attached to it, to have purpose and meaning attached to it. And that's really important. That's what we're all trying to do with our work here. So thank you so much to all three of you, Stephen, Sean, and Paige, for today's discussion. Thank you also to Corgan for putting together this panel discussion and for being so generous with your insights. I really appreciate it. Thank you to everyone who joined us for our discussion today. It was wonderful having you. Thank you for all the fantastic questions. We really spent a lot of time with each one, because I think, you guys in your questions kind of covered a lot of dimensions of what we can say about brand and brand experience. So thank you so much for that. Thanks also to our sponsors, ETC, etc., and Kimball, GKD Metal Fabrics, Growy, Knoll Textiles, Loftwall, Material Bank, and Versteel for making today's discussion possible. And thanks again, Sean, Paige, and Stephen. It's been an absolute pleasure. I hope all of you have a great evening.
Thank you, Avi. Thank you.
Thank you.